Okay, let's take a look at some of these stamped sketches here using the new Nature Set number 26 with the fences. I'm deciding on which one I want to finish off first. Um, this one's kind of standing out to me, but maybe it's because it's I don't know, it's the center piece here. But I don't know, when I look at these stamp sketches, I don't really conceive kind of the time of year or something like that I'm going to depict these in, or the time of day, daylight, moonlight, spring, fall, winter, whatever, summer. Um, but something like this one right here, where I've really wiped off the base of the trees to better showcase the silhouette of the fences here and to create that additional depth. I tend to look at that as potentially being a little bit more of a kind of a foggy, maybe early morning type of scene. It doesn't have to be, but that would certainly be kind of in the spirit of that varying value of trees like that. But it doesn't have to be, though. I could just do them, I don't know, whatever, high noon, under a canopy of foliage up top, But I don't know. Let's just start with any one of these. Let's go with this one right here. That one intrigues me. I haven't really done a composition like that before. That's so kind of heavily I don't know, structured with those types of lead-ins like that. This one right here is almost done. I just would need to kind of further um, uh, shade this piece. I don't know, this one looks pretty fun. It looks like to me like moonlight or something like that. You don't have to see the moon in there. It could be much higher up, kind of shining down on the landscape right here. But I don't know, maybe that'll be a second one or something like that. Or just, I don't know, when I don't have enough time to do a full scene, that one just needs to be finished off. But let's take a look here, and let's see what we can do with this one. I mean, okay, now, color scheme, it could be anything. Anytime you do just your black and white, types of layouts, you can color them with whatever you want. I'm going to go with, let's start off with just, I don't know if I'd call this a neutral foundation, but kind of it is. These are warm tones like this, and even if I lay down some warm tones, I could still make this a full-on winter scene. It would just have this kind of warmer foundation, but it would be underneath all these cooler colors. I don't know, that's something that I'd learned in oil painting. We would often do, no matter what color scheme we were working in, we would lay down something like this, an antique linen. It would be something more like a sepia or something like that, but a very just thin wash. So that's, I don't know, in many ways, that's what I'm still kind of doing in terms of a foundation of, stamp pieces with dye-based inks on. In this case, it's like a matte cardstock, okay? But the fundamentals are kind of still there. I kind of work from thin to thick here. Okay, now here's one of those things that if you haven't done this type of work before, and you can work in all kinds of different ways. I tend to work with these base layers, and that's what I generally refer to them as, base coats. And I like to get kind of a light foundation going. And I usually put it over most, if not everything, okay? All right, now my ink that I used last night was really thick because I had just re-inked my black. So I am actually smearing a little bit of this. I'm kind of surprised on this paper. You usually might do it on the glossy, but I don't know, I could heat set this a little bit more. I mean, it should be dry by now, so there's probably just some ink residue that's dried on the surface. Let's see if this heat gun will kind of improve that a little bit. Now, if I do get a little bit of residue kind of drag. I don't know what you would call it. That's not going to be a problem. So anyways, laying this down. Okay, now this paper that I'm using has a little bit of, yeah, it's working a little bit. I am getting a little bit of a ink drag with that, a little bit of smearing, but there's a lot of colors to come. Now, if you want to get less smearing, then you just kind of use more of a tapping motion, okay? So that you're not physically dragging something, and it's kind of more of just a, light application of color. But anyways, this is that base color again. And other colors to come will kind of eradicate, the smears, unless you just did it and you're getting like a massive, smear. That would be a problem. But if that's the case, just kind of adjust accordingly, heat set if need be, and you should be fine. But don't worry about those little types of drags, like, I don't know if you can see that, like right in here. I could see it right in front of me, but okay, now here's what I'm doing. Visual lead-ins, okay? No matter what they are. Roads are a perfect example. Paths, waterfalls, with the water coming towards you. I tend to leave those areas illuminated a little bit more. And in the absence of like a physical road or something like that, I would just leave kind of an area lighter, okay? So leave your area in here a little bit lighter. Now we're just working right now with the lightest color that we'll be using, okay? Because I start off with my base layers very light in value, okay? Antique linen is a very light color. If you have a tan, walnut stain's not really dark. It looks dark on this indexing right here, this, this piece of sticker that they have on there, to designate the color, but it is not terribly dark. You can potentially use something like that too. But work within your color scheme, If you're going to do something, antique linen can be used just about anything, okay? But I mean, if you can do this under your blues, if this is like a cool, super cool winter scene or something like that. But any type of thing. Dye-based ink, not pigment inks or something like that, or alcohol inks, okay? Well, I guess if you're coloring it a certain way, if you're a alcohol colorist user, you can use, your lighter tone colors. But going back to that idea of leaving some areas light, see, I'm leaving some of this light, but I do have like a very thin layer of some of this antique linen in here, okay? All right, now this won't take too long to come together. Your lightest color gets the most amount of coverage, because as I work incrementally darker, hopefully you have kind of a, stages. You don't have just something like this going all the way to black or something like that as your next color, If you can work incrementally darker, and when you use this same paper towel, you used it on here, and then you use the same one with this ink, you're getting a color that's in between these two because you still have a lot of this ink in your applicator. I'm just using a wadded up paper towel. Okay, add it down like that. See what it looks like, okay? Now watch this as I'm kind of working this little area right here. See this? I'm working my little corner like that. And I'm working from the outside, and I'm not trying to get... Sometimes people kind of, I don't know, they go a little bit too fast. They go like this. Why, I can't see anything there. So they go like this, or something of that sort. They try to get like a marker tile type of application of ink where it's a full, a pretty full application of that existing color in one swipe. But I'm using it to get much lighter tones, and then you add more and you get darker tones. It's like you're adding kind of almost your color almost in the spirit of a dry medium, like powder or something like that. You might almost call this a dry brush type of application if we were painting, You're just adding a very light amount, or a thin amount, and fairly dry amount media on there, okay? All right, so adding this down like so, all right. Underneath like some large sequoias or something like that. Not that you can't do this green or something like that, you know, as if they're in grass, but I tend to imagine this scenario as these kind of giant sequoias in a, I don't know, national park or something like that, you know. So I'm not adding, greens down here. Unless, I know, I'm eyeballing this peel paint, and I thought, yeah, maybe it might look kind of cool down there, just to add a tinge of green here. Maybe at the base of the, the trees or something like that. But, I don't know. Usually at the base, there's not a lot of growth down there. But let's just take a look here. And this will kind of give you an idea of kind of the spirit or methodology that I utilize in order to test a given color out. See, I mean, there's just a slight tinge of that green right here. Do you see the difference between that and that? It's not like a full, real thick application of that color. So that's the benefit of just working nice and slow, where, you can barely see it, or you can't see it at all with one tap, but then you just keep tapping it on there, and it's like something that's coming into focus ever so slightly, or slowly, and you get complete control over it, like that. Okay, now that is that. I think I want to... I've been using some colored pencils lately. And, okay, maybe I'll go with a little bit of a darker color here. Here's my Marvy brown. Okay, I'm going to grab it. This is my big stack of ink pads here on my table. Every time I want a certain color, it's like towards the bottom of the stack. Good thing these things are indexed on the side with the label, so I can at least see whereabouts. I'm just going to leave this right next to me. Okay. Yeah, that looks better. See, as I'm kind of darkening my shadow area here, okay? The darker you take an area down here, the more the trees will get anchored into the scene. It would even be good to go all the way to black, okay? Because I use black to stamp out my images in, okay? See, when you get a little bit darker, or you can go a lot darker, I become a little bit more perimeter oriented with it. I don't go into the scene quite as much. Okay, going up. I can't get this isn't a really great one to go into those tree trunks. So, the big tree trunk I can get into like that. Okay, but you see that? And look how much stronger my lighting became too. See? It kind of really invites the viewer into the scene when you have those strong visual lead-ins in terms of the darker imagery, but also light like that. Okay? Alright, that was rich cocoa. It probably doesn't look like rich cocoa. That doesn't look like it there because I'm putting it over the top of all these other colors. Dye-based inks are transparent, so the colors underneath are always going to affect what you end up seeing. Okay, we're not putting down opaque applications of color. All right, let's give a really dark brown. Dark brown layer. See, it's just ever so slightly darker like that. And it gets darker the more I do that because the more I tap into my next color, it starts to become more of whatever color you're working with than the previous color, which was soaked into the paper towel. See, you can get all these different versions of combinations of colors too, okay, by doing this type of method. So you're really kind of expanding on the number of colors that you can utilize through the use of ink blends. And you don't have to physically, change anything. You're just using the same paper towel for it, so you get some kind of version of all those colors used together like that. And what does that do? It really kind of expands your color range of available colors just using everything that you already have. Provided you have, some, a decent selection. But even if you have just, I'd say 14 colors. I tend to say that because that's the amount of colors I used to teach in my workshops early on, and that wasn't even using pads. I was using ink pens before dye-based pads were available to us. Alright, so there's your dark brown. It's getting richer and richer in terms of the ink saturation there. Okay, now going back to my colored pencil comment, let's go with a few different browns here. I might even go with kind of a reddish brown maybe. And we'll just color accordingly, okay? Varying the amount of whatever, pigment or wax that I want on my trees like this. And I start off very light too. See this right here? I just go with a very light application of media. Over here, in this area where I've applied more of the dye-based ink, you can't really see this one quite as much. Well, actually it is influencing it a little bit. Going with a darker color. I mean, I can get darker using kind of a more, firm application of that. But I still want it to do a lot of blends here, so before I get too dark with it, I just kind of want to kind of control the, I don't know, just some of the tones first, okay? I want to get the most amount of color. Now down here, I didn't get a really great application of, some different values, so I'll just use the wax now. Now, that being said, if you're going to use any more dye-based inks, I would I'd suggest you do that before you add any of this wax type of medium on here, because if you try to stamp or color, a wax type of, or water-based over wax, you're not going to get a really good impression with that. Speaking of that, I was going to stamp this hiker and child right in here. Like so. Did I add too much wax down there already? I could do it in I'll do it in my Memento graphite black. Graphite black pretty much, it sticks to most things, just because it's a thicker ink. Let me see here. I kind of forgot I was going to stamp this out here. Let's go like this. I think I am stamping it over some of that colored pencil, but let's see how it goes. Yeah, okay, that's fine. If I did it in dye-based ink, I'm not quite sure how it would have taken, how it would have applied. But this I don't know, it's your solution for just about anything, any kind of potential problem areas with media overlap. Sometimes you lay down some type of medium, and then you lay down another one on top of it. Sometimes the top one doesn't adhere. The Brilliance graphite, or just Brilliance inks in general, are pretty good about being able to apply over most other mediums. I wouldn't say everything because I haven't tried everything, but everything that I've tried, it hasn't had a problem. Because it's pigment ink, so it's thick, but it also is faster drying. Okay, now this is a black right here, colored pencil. So see, I'm adding those shadows in there, so it's deepening it. Doesn't it look a little bit more anchored in? And I'm doing this right here. See, I'm doing more of like a 5%, 10% addition. You know what I mean? I'm using a very light touch on this. See this tree right here? I want it to be a little bit more in shadow, so I'm just, I don't know, it's probably like a 1%, addition with every little, pass, okay? So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't even know if it's that. It might be a half percentage. By the time I kind of go like this a few times, maybe it's just, I don't know, a couple percentage points in terms of value, getting a little bit darker. See, it's like where I've established this shadow down here. Maybe I'll go and reiterate it a little bit with this. You can come in here too with your alcohol inks. I would do that before the colored pencils, but you can add alcohol inks over the tops of dye-based inks, no problem. Dye-based inks over alcohol is not going to work really good, but those dye-based inks as a foundation, water-based inks, you can use almost anything over the top of them. Colored pencil, alcohol inks, pigment inks, okay? So when I lay these down too, that being said, with all the other things that I can lay over the top of it, if I don't get kind of a really good application, a smooth one, a finished looking one, maybe a rough looking one, I don't worry about it because I have a lot of these other mediums that I can apply over the top and plan to anyway, Okay, so see this right down here? I'm adding some shadow, and this colored pencil can also get a little bit of texture going. I like the texture of colored pencils. That's one of the beautiful things about colored pencils. Everyone's all into kind of like the absence of texture with colored pencils, which that looks fine too, but I wouldn't do it all the time because that's one of the nice things about colored pencils and markers are getting those textures going. Texture in art is significant. Now, smooth is a texture. There's a smooth texture to it, but smooth looks really good, and it looks extra smooth if you contrast it with texturized and visible texture, okay? So the smooth can look even smoother. Everyone always wants to kind of use Gamsol or something like that, which looks really good, but they use it over everything, so everything looks smooth, but it would look so much smoother if they use contrast to make it, certain areas look smoother and certain areas look more textured. Okay, now down here, I'm creating a little bit of a shadow coming off of those two figures, so I'm kind of adding a little bit more black ink. And as I come out here, I'm using less, okay? I'll connect that up with this shadow over here. I'll show you the textures in here. And I'm not a good colored pencil user. I don't know, anyone that uses it is, better than I am, but I think I'm achieving some decent textures down here in the spirit of the colored pencil mark. Okay, so see this right in here? See that? It's kind of showing the texture of the paper. You can see that where that brown went to there. And I'm coming a little bit farther in with the black. Black's darker than brown, but not in the application that I use. It's more like a 5% or something like that. But see that shadow like that? Isn't that kind of a nice texture? And that texture right there has more of the spirit of kind of a rough ground like that. This reminds me of going, I don't know, like visiting the sequoias or something like that, the giant redwoods, and kind of walking through them like that. With the family, that was one of those family vacations. I was still pretty young, but I think I do recall, seeing some of them. Speaking of that, I'll add a little bit of more of a reddish tinge to this. It doesn't read as red, but in some of the areas where I didn't put too much ink, you can see more of this kind of rusted, brown reddish tinge here. There's all that mulch created by these ancient trees, right? So why not put some of that down on the ground? You see how that, you do that, whatever colors you're using in certain areas, you use in other areas to create continuity between those areas. That, Really hit it in the shadow areas too. Don't forget those areas. Hit it behind the fences too, and some of that area back there. This is really going to be fun to add in the white pigment ink when I get around to that. Okay, so I think that's kind of getting there. I have this largely open area back there. I'm not quite sure what I want in there. I might want it just as is, I can go with a little bit more of a tinge of some color. Let's go back to that black. And if you've watched my videos before, you'll know that I like to kind of give a vignette to my pieces. So I'll go with a little bit of a black around the edges, but especially kind of focused in the four corners. So see that right there? I just kind of darken in this corner like that. Now don't rush it now, okay? I'm telling that to myself too. Just take it nice and, slow. And you won't have to blend in kind of a, harsh mark that you don't want, okay? See this right here? I'm just going with a little bit of a darker corner like this. See how it kind of closes off that corner? And we'll follow suit right here. Maybe this will be the darkest corner because we have a kind of a heavily shaded area right in here. I went through years without using colored pencils, and I don't know. I've always liked the look of them. I'm kind of using them more as a in a multimedia application rather than just only colored pencils. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to try something only colored pencils, but I mean, it's perfect for little details, textures, getting into little tiny areas that you can't get to with, your dye-based inks, no matter how small your, the applicator you're using, how detail-oriented it is. You just can't get, that little tiny area than you can get with a pointed, hard medium like this. All right, so that looks pretty. It's kind of foggy and kind of atmospheric already, right? But we're going to really push that aspect of it with, where is it? My white, here it is, my white brilliance ink. All right, so just a nice little cotton ball. I don't know how nice this one is. This one looks kind of frayed, but get it into like a nice little surface area, okay? Just wide open, it's a little bit too soft, so I need to kind of make it a little bit more dense and condensed, so I just go like that, okay? I'll take this and be careful about using too much on your pad. Blot it off a few times. Get a pretty decent amount in there though, but then kind of smash it down to kind of prep the surface too. It kind of smashes it down a little bit. Okay, now they're going out in this area, and that's where the light is. So watch this fence right here, okay? See that? The more distant area, the fence, is becoming lighter, right? So doesn't that look like it's kind of going off into, the distance that way? Things in the distance are usually a little bit lighter. Now this one we're really making lighter. I already had kind of lighter impressions of my tiny rocks out there. So I've kind of given myself a head start in kind of depicting depth and distance and atmosphere by just stamping my imagery lighter to begin with. But let's say these two hikers, hiker and child, are kind of going out for a morning stroll, okay? So there's still this kind of fog kind of on the ground. Now here, I'm not going to make that too much lighter, but I will make it lighter, like right around the base of these. Now look at that. There's this kind of low-lying fog. I'll put it right across the hiker's legs too, okay? But see, I can put this white down here because I've left this light like that. So I usually go light into light, and where this really looks good is where light meets dark, okay? So I'm kind of adding it down here in the light, and then you transition it a little bit into the dark, okay? This is light up here, right, behind my tree. And see this right here, where it's going a little bit over the front of that tree? Doesn't it look like it's kind of capturing some of that light back in there? I can put some at the base of this tree right here. Now where I'm adding it down with a couple taps, I can't see anything, okay? That's what you want. You want to take it nice and slow. And you want to apply it in a nice controlled application. What happens is a lot of times, see, I know what to expect here, but when someone first starts out, they go like this, and they're thinking, hey, there's nothing there, so they really put it thing, and then they put a big blob down like that, okay? Kind of just be careful about that. Every time you re-ink, just use a nice light tap, okay? And tap like 20 times. And then if you can see it, then that's what you want. If it's too blobby with 2 taps, then there's probably too much ink, or you're using too much pressure. See this right here? Just take it nice and slow. Imagine, I always say this, but imagine you're applying, here we are close to Halloween time. Imagine you're applying some like cold pack cream, white makeup to, like a 5-year-old's face or something like that. That's about the pressure you want to apply, okay? All right, see that kind of mist down here? But isn't that kind of creating a little bit more atmosphere? Let's put some of this on this tree like that. Now, if you want to, make it lighter, then, certainly get a good amount in there and apply it down like that. This is like the morning walk amongst the giants, going out into the fog like that. I think I will kind of put a little bit on this fence like that. Look at that. That softened it up, but doesn't that look like it's really going out into the distance like that now? Maybe that fence is a little bit too big for these people like this. I don't know. It makes those fences kind of really gigantic. Maybe those people would have been better up here, but I don't know. I think this looks pretty good, though. Okay, I think that looks about right. What do you think? Good atmosphere. Now let's go in and add a few little sharper highlights with a white paint pen. I think it looks pretty good as is, though, but we'll kind of push it a little bit more with some crisp highlights. I'm going to let this set up here for a couple minutes, and then I'll come back to it and we'll finish. Okay, we've allowed this to settle and dry for about half an hour. And I was taking a look at this, maybe before I add in some additional little touches with my white paint pen, I thought I would go into this a little bit with some additional tone, a little bit of green. It could represent, oh, I don't know, it could represent moss or something like that. Maybe that's a little bit too much, actually. There we go. You got to use all the tools, you know, God-given tools. Okay, I'm going to add some of this on my trees too, just to give it a little tinge of, I don't know, a different hue. Sometimes when you do that, you just kind of extend the range of hue within your, you know, within your piece. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. All right, now that being done like that, I think I did get a little bit too much here, so I'm going to mute that a little bit so you get the benefit of the color, but it just doesn't have to be as strong. I mean, it wasn't like a super strong application of it or anything like that, but I don't know, we're talking about little tiny minute little things that you can do potentially on your pieces if you so choose to. I'm going to creep this little bit of fog a little bit along this fence over here too. Fog, mist, whatever you want it to be. Morning mist. Yeah. Okay, so that looks good to me. Like that. Even a little blue down here might look kind of interesting. It's just kind of sneaking in a little bit of like a cool tone. Can you see that? It's sneaking in a cool temperature amongst a warm environment. Now this is a little bit of a warm blue. It's more of a turquoise or something like that. But just doing a tiny little bit of something can expand on the temperature range of a piece, even if it's in a tiny, minute, barely discernible application, okay? Suddenly you've turned something from all warm to warm, and then cool, okay? There was nothing in the cool spectrum, temperature-wise, in here. Let me see if you can see that there. I don't know if you can tell like that, right down in here. There's a slight different hue than right there. It's a little bit of that blue in there. I don't know, can you see? It's very subtle, even like right here in person. Okay, so your white paint pen. Okay, the white paint pen is there. I mean, look at. I mean, even on a black little thing like this, here's your highlights on this right here, right? See this right here? All these little highlights around on here. My fingernails. My cracked fingernails and stuff. See, there's these tiny little highlights on there. I mean, my skin's not reflective or anything like this, but, you know, you can even see little highlights like that here and there, right? It's on everything around us. You know, here's a piece of wood. You know, I mean, there's a hard highlight on it like that, but, you know, this edge right here has a little bit of highlighting. I mean, certainly on reflective, I'm just showing you some things that are a little bit less reflective. Here's a piece of plastic. It's not like glass or anything like that, but there's your highlight there and highlight there. The way I would do it on here is like two little dots. So where do you put it on something like this? Well, I start off in the lighter areas again. This is an acrylic paint pen, but let's put little highlights down in the road like that. And I kind of condense them in the lighter areas, and then I kind of dissipate it. I put, well, you say, well, how do you dissipate it? you put more space in between your dots. And it just kind of ends right there. But this is kind of acting like that fog, but just in a very crisp dot like that. Now it's very subtle because it's white on a very light area, but let me see if you can see that. See that right in there, that little texture? You can't really, it's not really that noticeable, but from a textural standpoint, those little subtleties like that, I think, can hit people, I don't know, on a subconscious level or something like that too. But it just adds in crisp amongst very soft, okay? Everything in here, I mean, the imagery is crisp, but as far as the color applications and things like, the white pigment ink, of course, is very soft looking, okay? But let's take a look at this now. See, the lighting is largely coming from this area in the background, right? That's our light source, but for the most part, the hardest, the brightest area is right here. Okay, because as I move out here, it gets darker and darker. Think about this in the background, okay? The trees are in the foreground. So, on the trees, on these trees to the right of that light source, I'm going to put the highlights on the left side of the tree because that's the side facing the light side. Just a few little dots like this. You can't see it too much on this tree because it's right next to the light, but over here you might be able to see a little bit more. See, I can put a few little dots like this, and then you can kind of dissipate it. Let me see if we can see that. Here it's very subtle because it's white against pretty light. See that? A little highlighting like that. You can still see it like right there, right? Then as you get a little bit farther away, it's much more subtle, okay? Kind of break it up, make it a little bit more irregular too. Like down here, it could be one or two dots. All right, now it's the opposite for this tree up here. The lighting is coming from the right of it, so on the right side of the tree, I'll put the highlights. Now there's very little of that tree showing, so it won't be too much. But it's one of those subtle little things that make, can make a pretty big difference. Okay, on the fence post like this, and maybe I put too much on that, but who cares? A couple little dots like this. Right around that edge, like that. Let me show you what it does right here. This is kind of white against pretty dark, but look at that. Don't those little dots on the side of those posts, see right over here, I think I put like 2 dots right there. I mean, you can't really see it very much. It's not like, oh my gosh, that looks so dimensional. No, but I think it can make a little bit of a difference. It kind of pulls the image out from the background just a touch, like that. See those little highlights like that. It makes it look a little bit more dimensional, I think. And you can follow suit with the fence on the other side. Now I need to spray seal this because as I go into some of this white pigment ink that I did, when I go into it with this pen, if I kind of drag it, I'm kind of dragging up some of that white pigment ink. So, we can just, spray seal this with a light coat of acrylic spray. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Let's hit this a little bit more out here. A little more texture. You can even put a little bit of highlight on some of these little tiny rocks down on the pathway. On this fence, I have it kind of illuminated on the top of the fence anyways, on these horizontal posts, and you can kind of reiterate that a touch. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so see this right up here on these fences, the imagery is top lit. See this right here, where the top of it is lighter than the bottom side? Same thing up here and here. See where I have that little line? It's not all silhouette. Some of them are silhouette like that. But even so, in their subtleties, there's a little bit more light up on top than on the bottom. See right like that? So I've just put a couple little dots in that lighter area of those fence posts. Or not on the posts, but on the, what do you call it? The rung? I forgot what you call those things. Okay, so I think that is it. There's our first rendering of a fence using kind of multimedia here. Yeah, we have some other ones to go. This is probably going to be a winter scene. Something like that, but that was really fun. We have strong visual lead-ins, and I've reinforced this idea of the visual lead-in by leaving a lighter area like this. It's like if we went out into some area, okay, some trail or something like that, and just imagine it, that there's this pathway, okay, and it's like illuminated or something like that. It compels us really, kind of from an emotional standpoint, to follow that area, right? If we darken in this whole area right here, from an emotional standpoint, it's like, do I want to go down a dark path? So what you do, even if this path is dirt or whatever it is, you illuminate it like that with some light, and that makes it a very welcoming kind of path to follow. Welcoming, intriguing, whatever. So that's what you do for your lead-ins like this. So on this road right here, I'm going to make that the lightest area. It doesn't mean that it has to be white light or something like that, but just make it lighter than your surrounding area. Okay? So however light you keep this a little bit darker, and then it becomes illuminated, right? So this could be very light, but just leave this a little bit lighter. Doesn't mean you can't put some shadows in here, but just have some area that's a little bit lighter in here, this pathway. All right, so that's what we've done here. We've created a little corridor of light. Now on this one right here, this one was already toned in here, so this area right here is the same tone as this. So I would probably darken this area out here a little bit, like this, like right in here and right in here, so that this becomes lighter by contrast. And I can darken up the edges right here, so by contrast, this area and this area is lighter, and it makes us pull and wander into the scene. And it also makes it very welcome, welcoming, whatever, walk, adventure, whatever, journey. All right, so anyways, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks as always for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.